Jewish music research in Hamburg. Yeah, I got a message from Verena. I thank Verena very much for your support, because she can let the people in. So I'm not busy with that. Thank you, Verena. So we have to wait. I see Edwin is coming. Yes. Hello, Edwin. Good morning. Good morning, Edwin. So.
Guten Morgen.
Yeah. I'm waiting a minute. Verena, I think we wait a little bit until we start the YouTube streaming, okay? Ah, LV has arrived. Okay. Hello, LV.
Sorry for the delay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Bonjour. We are going on the second day of our conference. And I think, Verena, you can start now the YouTube streaming. Thank you. Well, I welcome Yasha Nemtsov, whom I know for many years. And I think it is through Weinberg that I came to know you a little bit more. I remember this wonderful concert you gave at the German Parliament together with Kolja Blacher, who has been a colleague of mine here in Hamburg before he moved to Berlin, where you played the Weinberg violin sonata. It was very moving, very touching, and it was the right piece for Yom HaShoah on the 27th of January in 2012. And you have recorded with him, with Kolja, Shostakovich and Weinberg sonatas, and you were awarded the German Record Critics Prize for that. I cannot count all the recordings you have done, more than 40. I stepped actually on the site, on the website of the European Center of Jewish Music Studies, on a recording you did on Ladino songs with accompaniment, which was very helpful for my students because we had a presentation on Sephardic songs, and this was a very valuable source. Well, you are a pianist, musicologist, and so first I introduce you as a pianist because, well, I'm a musician, theoretist as well, but your academic degrees are and activities are as developed as your artistic activities. You are academic director of the Cantorial School of Abraham Gaia College, and since 2013 you were professor for history of Jewish music in Weimar. I think this position has been created for you actually, and so that is exactly also our theme today, Jewish music history. And well, you publish on all kinds of subjects. I cannot count all the books you've written. Your dissertation, habilitation was on contemporary Jewish music, especially the new Jewish school in St. Petersburg. And you wrote about a book on Lewandowski as well as about Alkan. I even didn't know that Alkan. I just know him as a pianist and a very revolutionary pianist and composer. and I didn't know he was Jewish. I learned that today. So please, I'm looking very much forward, because it's a very nice transitional lecture we hear today, because Leo Kornitzer emigrated to Israel, and he died in Haifa. And tomorrow, Yuval and me, we will talk about another emigration, Joseph Tal, from Berlin to Jerusalem, and what came back from Jerusalem then to Hamburg. Dear Yasha, please go ahead. It's now up to you.
Thank you very much, dear Reinhard, for this friendly and nice introduction, and of course for inviting me to participate in this conference along with wonderful colleagues. I'm going now to share my PowerPoint presentation. So I hope it can be seen by everybody. It is not as pretty as the both presentations we saw yesterday. It's just about a few pictures, and my paper will consist of 3 parts. Yesterday we already heard in the lecture of Professor Sirusi a little bit about the history of the about the history of Hamburg Reform Temple and its musical life, but I would still like to include an overview of it in my paper with maybe some additional points. The second part will be the presentation of Leon Kornitzer's biography and his work, and the third part finally about the journal, the Jewish Cantor, der Jüdische Kantor. When Kornitzer came to Hamburg in 1913, the city was considered an important center of synagogal music. We already saw yesterday a portrait of Joseph Rosenblatt when he was a thin young man. Now it is a picture of his later years. Edwin already told that he got a bit more round. Joseph Rosenblatt worked in the years 1906, 1912 in the Orthodox Bornplatz synagogue, and it was him who was called the king of the Chazanim. Through his early recordings, one of which we listened yesterday to, and especially through his participation in the 9th Zionist Congress, which took place in Hamburg at the end of December 1909, Rosenblatt already became world famous during his Hamburg years. He later lived in the USA, as already mentioned. Another picture was also presented yesterday. This is the Rosenblatt's counterpart at the Reform Temple and Kornitzer's immediate predecessor, Moritz Henle, who also had the international reputation. His liturgical music, which was printed around the turn of the century, here you can see an edition from 1903, was not only widely disseminated throughout Germany, but was also used in Reform synagogues in the United States. As also mentioned by Edwin, in 1905, Henle was one of the founders of the Standesverein der Jüdischen Kantoren in Deutschland, professional association of Jewish cantors in Germany, later called General German Association of Cantors, and he was its first chairman in the years 1906 to 1919. When Kornitzer began working in the temple in 1913, the reform movement in Hamburg could already look back on a history of almost 100 years. Founded in 1817, the new Israelite Temple Association and the synagogue it supported which according to the Reform ideology was called a temple, was the first established and viable Reform congregation in the German-speaking world. This very first temple, first synagogue of this association, built in 1818 on the Erste Brunnenstraße, was the first synagogue with both an organ and a gallery for the choir. The rite of the Hamburg temple and its prayer book became a model for Reform congregations around the world from the 1820s onward. The musical standard established in Hamburg, a combination of cantorial solos, the mixed choir, and organ accompaniment, was also adopted in many larger Reform synagogues from the mid-19th century. By the early 20th century, over 70 German synagogues had an organ. This type of musical arrangement required the presence of 3 musicians: cantor, choir director, and organist. By the early 1840s, the Hamburg Reform congregation, which had only a few dozen members when it was founded, had already grown to about 800 families. It needed a larger prayer house, a picture which also was showed yesterday on September 5, 1844, a few days before Rosh Hashanah. The congregation's newly built synagogue, the new temple on Polstraße, was inaugurated. The head of the Temple Society, Dr. Maimon Frenkel, contacted Felix Mendelssohn in advance of the dedication ceremony with the intention of commissioning a composition for it. In his letter of November 14, 1843, Frenkel wrote, I quote, "We have a choir of 16 boys for the usual service. However, for unusual performances, we can also count on the participation of at least 40 ladies and gentlemen of Jewish and Christian faith, as was the case last October when a cantata was performed by a young local composer for the 25th anniversary of the temple. The soon-to-be inaugurated temple will receive a new, rather large organ, which is now being built here." End of the quotation. The first 2 cantors of the temple, David Mendola and Joseph de Mose Pisa, were of Portuguese Sephardic descent and accordingly arranged the liturgy in the Sephardic pronunciation of Hebrew. The musical quality of the services during this period apparently left much to be desired. Kornitzer later reported on this in his biographical article about Moritz Henle. I quote, "Dr. Pisa, whose beautiful bass voice earned him the designation the Jewish Zarastro," so Dr. Leimdörfer told me, "whose journalistic, literary, and political activities," he was among other things a member of the Bürgerschaft, however, occupied him to a greater extent. He seems, moreover, as far as it can be concluded from the available sources, to have been only a better amateur as a musician. The musical form of the services was accordingly quite inartistic. The condition of the choir was desolate. End of the quote. That would have changed decisively when Moritz Henle took office in 1879. Henle came from Württemberg and was educated both at the Stuttgart Music Conservatory in violin and music theory and at the Royal Württemberg School Teachers Seminary in Esslingen. He came to Hamburg in 1879 and then served as head cantor, Oberkantor, at the new temple for 34 years altogether. Henle's own compositions were influenced to some extent by works of Felix Mendelssohn, to whom, by the way, he was related through his wife, Caroline Franziska Herschel. A quote from Kornitzer, "Henle's first endeavor was the thoroughgoing transformation of the choir. With the help of a small committee, he founded within half a year a voluntary choir consisting of 22 ladies and 8 gentlemen from the first circles of society, and edited for the first time already in March 1880 to the service as a valuable factor. The service could now, probably remaining in the previous temple tradition, strongly interspersed with Sephardic elements, maintain above all musical essence and artistic form. Now back to Kornitzer. Before he was employed in Hamburg, he had already enjoyed not only a profound and varied education, but also gained ample experience in various musical fields. He grew up in Vienna and received his first music lessons from his father, Adolf Kornitzer, who was himself a Chazan. As noted in a biographical article, he came from, I quote, a family belonging to the cantor profession for generations. The family apparently came from Hungary. In the years 1893 to 1897, he studied at the Kantorenbildung Anstalt cantorial school of the Israelitisches Pro-Seminar, Israelite Seminary in Brünn, today it's Brno, where his parents lived at the time. You can see here the great synagogue in Brünn of the time and an advertisement of this cantorial school of the cantor Joseph Heller, who was the head of the school, offering the Chazanim, the young Chazanim, for the high holidays. The founder and longtime director of this institution was the outstanding cantor Joseph Heller, who apparently had a formative influence on the young Kornitzer. Heller's own musical studies were well-rounded, including training at the Royal School of Music in Debrecen, and he began his career as an opera singer, like many other Chazanim, at the Royal Opera in Budapest. In 1890, he was appointed head cantor in Brünn, where he also served as president of the Moravian Cantors Association until 1927. In addition to cantor training with Heller and singing in the Brünn Synagogue choir, vocal lessons with Leopold Schmidt, who was not only a cantor, but also a well-known vocal pedagogue and expert in voice training, were also important for Kornitzer. After completing his studies, Kornitzer worked for several years at Jewish congregations in smaller Bohemian towns as choir master in Iglau and as cantor in Klatau and Zad, before becoming head cantor at the New Jerusalem Synagogue in Prague in 1906. The synagogue was named not after the city of Jerusalem, but after Jerusalem Street in Prague. And it was inaugurated in the same year during the festival of Simchat Torah. This Jerusalem synagogue was also called the Jubilee Temple because its construction was planned in the year of the 50th anniversary of the throne of Emperor Franz Joseph I. And the services there were initially organized according to the Hungarian neological rite. Kornitzer then spent 26 years of his life in Hamburg, that is from 1913 to 1939, a period in which his creative power could fully develop. However, when World War I began, as an Austrian citizen, he was immediately drafted and fought as an officer until the end of the war, receiving several military decorations. Here is the picture also used by Edwin yesterday. Here you can see Kornitzer in his military uniform. A newspaper article published on his 60th birthday provides an overview of his later diverse activities and also his stylistic development. a quote, "His style has changed over the years. He has become more Jewish, following Kirchner's example, and more following these traditional motifs. He keeps to the old Steiger, those old scales now displaced by major and minor, which should finally become common property of all modern cantors again." Even the compositions of German texts show this conscious intention of an archaizing style. Here too, the Jewish melody resonates with the German text. Kornitzer has published only a part of his religious compositions, nothing of his secular ones. In his table rests, as we know, a lot of valuable compositions in manuscript. May he give them to the public. End of the quotation. In addition to his activities as a cantor and composer, Kornitzer had been an active music journalist since the 20s. Among other things, he was responsible for the music supplement in the Hamburg Israelitisches Familienblatt, Israelite Family Journal. A selection of the musical pieces published there appeared in 1933 in a volume under the title Jüdische Klänge, Jewish Sounds. The volume included synagogal, paraliturgical, and folkloristic melodies for solo piano, for voice or violin with piano accompaniment, or for polyphonic choir. You can see here a picture of this music supplement, the number from December 1933, and the publishers, this Jewish publisher Lessmann of Hamburg, advertising Jüdische Klänge, the collection based on the paper supplements. The music supplements, as well as the resulting collection, were explicitly aimed at amateur musicians who were looking for an easily playable, suitable Jewish repertoire. The arranged pieces for various instrumentations could easily find use in home music making. The collection was divided into 4 sections. First, the public service for Shabbat, for the high holidays, and for the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Shalosh Regalim. Second, for the Jewish home, Zmirot for Shabbat and for the Seder evenings. Third, the Jewish folk song. And fourth, free compositions. In 1931, a new synagogue of the Israelitischer Tempelverband, Israelite Temple Association, was inaugurated. You see this new building in the Oberstraße, and the rabbi of that time, Bruno Italiener. The move to this new, larger building in the sober Bauhaus style on Oberstraße in Harvestehude ushered in a final upswing for the temple congregation. Leon Kornitzer played a key role in this, along with the rabbi Dr. Bruno Italiener, who officiated there from 1927 until the end of the Hamburg Temple in 1938. Kornitzer's name is indispensable in the cultural life of the Jewish community of that time. He appeared not only as a singer, as well as a composer and music writer, but also as a choir director and occasionally even as a piano accompanist. For example, in Hamburg in the spring of 1928, there was a concert by the outstanding Jewish cantor from Hanover, Israel Alter, in which he was accompanied on the piano by Kornitzer. Everybody of us would like to attend this concert almost 100 years ago. After 1933, Kornitzer became an active member of the Jewish Cultural Association, Jüdischer Kulturbund, in Hamburg. You can see here a typical concert program of the temple choir, including also choir pieces by Henle, Kornitzer, Lewandowski, and others. At the Hamburg Temple, Kornitzer collaborated with other talented Jewish musicians Worthy of mention are the choir conductor Georg de Haas. You can see his name here, the musikalische Leitung, and the organist Hermann Zerini, who was a remarkable personality and who also performed as a pianist and as a conductor. You can see here conducted on piano the temple choir. Another concert from a later time, it is already 1938, a concert by the Jüdischer Kulturbund, and you can see again all three names of the temple musicians: the organist Hermann Zerini, the choir conductor Georg de Haas, Leon Kornitzer, and a singer and alto singer from the Jüdischer Kulturbund, Selma Horowitz, with a concert of secular music. Already before the First World War, new tendencies were emerging within the Hamburg temple movement. Whereas previously, the aim was to shape a new Jewish identity that distinguished itself from Jewish orthodoxy and connected to the Christian environment. In the following years, the focus was more on overcoming the resulting internal division in Judaism and creating a common Jewish identity in dialogue with the orthodoxy. While Hamburg was of international importance in the 19th century as the cradle and stronghold of religious reform, many aspects of reform were withdrawn there in the 20th century, and the rite has become increasingly traditional. The musical arrangement of the services for which Kornitzer was responsible developed in a similar direction. Unlike reform cantors of the early period, Kornitzer was not only traditional in his own work, but he was open to the music of the Orthodox synagogue, which he also appreciated. Of course, it is a big subject and many names should be mentioned in the connection. First of all, the Rabbi Jacob Sonderling, who worked at the temple during the World War I and until the beginning of the 20th, before he went to the USA and became a famous rabbi in Los Angeles. Among others, he initiated the composition of Kol Nidre by Arnold Schoenberg in 1939. A common denominator for many liberal and Orthodox Jews became their relationship to Jewish reconstruction in Palestine and to Zionist ideas. Like many German Jews, Kornitzer became increasingly interested in Zionism, especially after 1933. In early 1935, he took part in a trip of several weeks by representatives of German Jewry to Palestine. The travel group was led by the Orthodox Hamburg Rabbi Josef Karlebach and included the liberal Berlin rabbi and president of the Reichsvertretung der Juden in Deutschland, Reich representation of Jews in Germany, Leo Beck, as well as the eminent Zionist and former chairman of the World Zionist Organization, Otto Warburg. Also present was the rabbi of the Hamburg temple, Dr. Bruno Italiener. The steamer Tel Aviv of the Jewish Palestine Shipping Company left Hamburg on January 26 of 1935. After their return, Kornitzer and Rabbi Bruno Italiener gave public lectures in Hamburg about their impressions. You can see these lectures from the papers of the time. Kornitzer traveled to Palestine one more time in November 1936. In Jerusalem, he visited the university library where he studied the holdings of Jewish music and made a list of them. The list was published alongside a short report in the journal Der Jüdische Kantor in November 1937. During this time, Kornitzer was involved in the Zionist newspaper Jüdische Rundschau, which was published in Berlin. In his articles about Jewish cultural life in Hamburg, he was referred to as our reporter. Already at the end of the 20s, to be exactly in December of 1929, Leon Kornitzer was elected first chairman of the Allgemeiner Deutscher Kantorenverband, Vereinigung Jüdischer Kantoren, General German Association of Cantors, Union of Jewish Cantors, and he remained in this position until the summer of 1938. A heavy blow for Kornitzer was the death of his friend and colleague Emanuel Kirschner on September 28 of 1938. The Munich cantor Jakob Hohenemser, who came to the funeral together with Kornitzer, later recalled, I quote, "When cantor Leon Kornitzer and I drove to the cemetery, the Germans were greeting Chamberlain, who stood at the porch of the Regina Palace Hotel with his umbrella. It was a sad day." End of the quotation. Around this time, Kornitzer also devoted himself to teaching at the youth cantorial courses he founded at the Hamburg Temple. During the festival of Rosh Hashanah in October 1938, Kornitzer's 25th anniversary in office was celebrated there. Only a few weeks after this celebration, the temple on the Oberstrasse was desecrated and vandalized during the pogrom night on November 10. The building itself, which had survived the pogrom without major damage, had to be forcibly sold afterwards. The services of the temple congregation were still held in the B'nai Brit lodge at the Hartungstrasse until 1942. Allegedly, Kornitzer's former position as chairman of the Cantors Association was to help him to obtain one of the rare entry permits to Palestine, with which he was able to flee Germany with his family in 1939. Unlike many other refugees, Kornitzer was able to continue his professional career in Palestine. His last place of work was the Central Synagogue in Haifa. There are, of course, pictures of today, where he spent the last 8 years of his life as a cantor and choir conductor. In addition, he gave vocal lessons privately and prepared some contributions for the Jerusalem radio. It could not be determined where Leon Kornitzer's papers, which were to contain numerous unpublished musical manuscripts, were located after his death and whether they have been preserved at all. I talked to Yuval last night. He couldn't give me any information on that. Maybe Edwin, you could say something about it later. Not only is Leon Kornitzer almost completely forgotten today as an outstanding cantor and composer of Jewish liturgical music, his work as chief editor of the journal Der Jüdische Kantor, an equally significant contribution to Jewish culture, has not been appreciated or researched until now either. In any case, the 11-year existence of the journal Der Jüdische Kantor, and above all the high level of its publications, which was maintained until its dissolution in 1938, is inseparably linked with the name of Leon Kornitzer, who was its first and only chief editor. The conception of the journal Der Jüdische Kantor took up earlier periodicals addressed to Jewish cantors. The first one of this kind was the liturgical journal Liturgische Zeitschrift, published by cantor and school teacher Hermann Ehrlich on his own responsibility in the village of Berkach, Thuringia today, near Meiningen, in the years 1851 to 1861. I just published last year a long article on Ehrlich and his journal. It's really a very interesting very remarkable personality in a very rural area in today's Thuringia. Ehrlich's journal, originally called Liturgische Zeitschrift zur Veredelung des Synagogengesangs mit Berücksichtigung des ganzen Synagogenwesens. You can see the long title here. Liturgical journal for the refinement of synagogue singing with consideration of the entire synagogue system, was dedicated, just like the later Cantor journals published in the German-speaking world, to the refinement, Veredelung, refinement of synagogue music in the spirit of the Jewish reform movement, that is to a standardization of its forms and repertoire, which were also to meet certain qualitative requirements. Both theoretical treatises and musical publications were to contribute to this refinement. Abraham Blaustein, who came from Riga and in 1877 received the position of head cantor in Bornplatz in the province of Posen, today Bydgoszcz in Poland, founded the weekly newspaper Der Jüdische Kantor in 1879, which he then published on his own, just like Ehrlich, until 1898. In addition to this newspaper, Blaustein also published some books on this area, including this pamphlet, the Jewish Cantor in Jewish History, or Music in Judaism in the Middle Ages by Rabbi Israel Goldschmidt, which appeared in the same year, 1879. Here is Blaustein mentioned as a cantor in Briesen, and Rabbi Goldschmidt also was rabbi in Briesen, so I'm not sure that this biographical information about Bromberg is correct. The head cantor of the so-called Turkish temple in Vienna, Jakob Bauer, published in 1881 to 1902 the Austrian-Hungarian Cantors newspaper, organ for the general interests of Jewish cantors, which appeared about 3 times a month and was also widely received by Jewish cantors in the German Reich. Bauer was an extremely successful newspaper publisher, not only in the musical field. In 1895, he founded the Jewish daily newspaper Die Wahrheit in Vienna, which was then one of the most successful and longest-lived Jewish periodicals until the Anschluss of Austria. Leon Kornitzer referred to this history of Jewish cantor periodicals when he emphasized in his Note zum Geleit as an introduction at the beginning of the first issue, which you can see here, of the new periodical, the Jüdische Cantor, that it was the first time that a cantor periodical was to be published by a professional association. I quote, creating for the first time a journalistic organ edited by a cantors association and not by individuals or following existing periodicals. We all hope for good and beautiful things from this new work, end of quotation. Even this first issue of April 1927, as you can see, besides the organizational stuff, news and information from the Cantors Association already contained much that was good and beautiful. The academic supplement presented under the heading Liturgical Exercises a treatise by Cantor Abraham Nussbaum from Wiesbaden on Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, and the music supplement included compositions by Eduard Birnbaum and Hermann Ehrlich, among others, presumably out of respect for the latter's pioneering act of founding the liturgical journal. More than 75 years before. The other issues of the Jüdische Kantor followed this pattern of structure. Over the years, many important theoretical writings were printed and countless lesser-known compositions by German Jewish cantors from the past and present were published. In addition, readers could always find out about the activities of the Cantors Association and other news relevant to the profession. Although Kornitzer, as the chief editor, was supported by his colleagues in the editorial commission, cantors Josef Benjamin Levi from Frankfurt, Abraham Nussbaum from Wiesbaden, and Hermann Ziewi from Elberfeld, most of the work was on his shoulders. It is primarily to his credit that the journal, which after 1933 had to be published under the increasingly difficult social, material, and moral conditions of Nazi rule, was able not only to survive, but also to maintain a high level of its publications to the end. When Kornitzer resigned from his position as chairman of the Cantors Association in the summer of 1938, he presumably also resigned as editor of the journal The Jüdische Kantor soon thereafter. After the November pogrom in 1938, the publication of the journal would no longer be possible anyway. The July 1938 number was mentioned in a note of the Hamburg Jewish Community paper, and it was very likely the last issue of the journal. It was largely devoted to an appreciation of Kornitzer's work. The academic supplement of this number was also about Kornitzer. That was the writing of Emanuel Kirschner under the title Leon Kornitzer, a pioneer of traditional synagogue music. Today, the issues of the journal The Jüdische Kantor are extremely rare. The question is whether there is a complete collection worldwide, maybe in Jerusalem. I don't know. The holdings kept at the Leo Baeck Institute in New York have been digitized and are available on the internet. However, they contain a total of only 16 issues, and some volumes are not represented at all, among other, also the very last volume of 1938. Last year, while attending the liquidation of a private Judaica library, I found just by chance, I mentioned it already yesterday, an envelope containing the complete issues of the journal for the years 1935, 36, and 37, a total of 12 issues with the music supplements. Among them, 2 issues, number 1 from 1935 and number 3 from 1936. You can see them, that are not present in the collection of the Leo Baeck Institute. This envelope was really saved in that way from going to the trash immediately after. I just included in my presentation a few pictures of music supplements. You can see here the pentatonic by the Verlesung der Torah by Leon Kornitzer, and also a music example from an essay by Samuel Gutmann, for a cantor from Potsdam, and here another supplement, just for example, a piece of Emanuel Kirschner. In addition, this envelope included some theoretical writings published in the same years that were halacha on the organ issue by Rabbi Dr. Heinrich Lemle from Frankfurt, published in 4 installments, and mentioned essay from the field of psalm singing by cantor Samuel Gutmann from Potsdam in 2 installments. A publication of selected letters from Aaron Friedman to Kornitzer, Aaron Friedman's essay, musical reflections on some traditional synagogue melodies, and others. The journal The Jüdische Kantor is a valuable source not only for the history of Jewish culture, but also for Jewish cantorial art yesterday and today. It would be important to locate all the issues of the journal and make them accessible to research and to liturgical practice. Thank you very much. I am not sure, we still have enough time. I thought maybe we should also listen to some music by Leon Kornitzer as a part of this presentation. It's unfortunately very difficult to find any recordings of his music. Here is the Lecha Dodi version, and we can just from the beginning. I interrupt at this point, as everybody can listen himself or herself to the end, and I end sharing my display, and I'm looking forward to your questions and your, above all, your additions to this subject, Leon Kornitzer and his journal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jascha, for this wonderful view, especially on what happened in the Temple of the Oberstraße, which I know very well since '72 as the concert hall of the NDR. And well, I even didn't know that it was a synagogue when I entered there first. And now it becomes full of flourishing musical history that is of course, the cut seems more brutal as ever when you look at this past. But it's wonderful that we can reconstruct a little bit of it. And you've been really showing us a wonderful overview on what we missed there today. We have to say goodbye to our live stream on YouTube, because now we're going into the discussion, and because of juridical reasons, we are not allowed to stream that with everybody here on the screen. So I say goodbye to them. We'll meet again for the panel discussion at 5 o'clock on Jewish music research. This afternoon, we want to conclude the first section, I would say, the pre-war section of our inquiry, because tomorrow we will turn on the post-war aspects of Jewish presence here in Hamburg. My first question is if we can maybe discuss together the idea of the Jewish diaspora as a hybrid culture. The Jewish people had to adapt themselves for a couple of 100 years to different other cultures, and now we are just looking at a tiny part of it, and we can today maybe compare the French way with the German way. But of course, you could enlarge this discussion to a much larger scope, which would be impossible today, because, well, while I was studying in Israel, I was concentrating on the Oriental Jewish cultures, and this is a completely different subject. But for me, it is very striking how diverse these cultures are musically, because of course the Jews in German or Eastern Europe or Morocco, Georgia, they have adapted themselves to their musical environment. And what we learned yesterday and today is that this adaptation, this kind of slow getting closer to each other, to the environment culture, is a very typical development for the Jewish communities. And we were celebrating here in Germany 1,700 years of Jewish presence in Germany as well as France, I think. I mean, that is the same scope of time, which seems to me incredible long. But the Jewish people have always kept their own identity during this time, which is I think a unique phenomenon. I don't know any other a community life that is able to survive that kind of diaspora life for more than 1,700 years. But I would like to take up an idea that I got from Edwin. Edwin told me once in a normal talk that the relationship between tradition and modernity or innovation is in the diaspora special. There's a special relationship. And I think there's one item that I stepped on during this conference. This was yesterday when Hervé was citing, the Bayonne example, which turned out to be Mozart or not Mozart. This is not the question. But as you said, well, these songs are considered by the informants as ancient. And the ancient is the highest quality, so it has a very high quality. So maybe we can step into this view, how the feeling for the tradition is constructed inside the life of diaspora Jews, also maybe as psychological way to find to keep your own identity, because when you say I had different similar experiences in Israel, when they all said, well, yeah, where do you know this melody from? Yeah, it's from Moshe Mount Sinai. Yeah, it is. But this is in the consciousness that the tradition is holy and it is very, very ancient. We will step on that tomorrow, because when Joseph Tal was interviewed about national musical style Israel, he said, well, Israel is just a young country, a couple of years, but the Jewish people, that is a question of thousands of years. So this is a kind of a pride and of a consciousness about the ancient tradition. Maybe you can add or contradict me some ideas to this hypothesis.
Maybe I could start, if you wouldn't mind. You mentioned the word hybrid. hybrid
Yes.
culture. I personally like more the term transcultural.
Transcultural, yeah.
Transcultural, yeah, transcultural music. We have in Weimar, we have a wonderful colleague who is head of the chair for transcultural music studies, and somehow it became for me also a very important word, transcultural, combining different cultures. And I think it is a quite usual process when you live outside of your home country, that you adapt yourself to your surrounding. It actually everybody who is who doesn't spend his whole life where he was born know this process. I myself was a refugee. I came to Germany 30 years ago, and I think I combine in the meanwhile in my personality still many elements from my initial Russian Jewish identity with the German features, yeah, because I already spent more than half of my life in Germany, of course, in the German language and inside of German culture and German educational system and German state and so on and so on. I think the special about the Jewish culture is really this ability to preserve their own tradition in spite of all these manifold processes of assimilation and adaptation, and also pressure from the surrounding to adopt even more the culture of the society. And I think it is really very exciting to see quite detailed how the situation is in what country, in which epoch. I did a lot of research about the situation of Jews in Germany or in German countries, because there was not a Germany still before 1871. How was the situation in the 30s, 40s, 50s of the 19th century? And we have there quite different factors. On the one hand, it is the promise of emancipation, which many Jews, which inspired many Jews to this self-adaptation to the Christian society. On the other hand, it was a strong pressure from the state towards the Jews. For example, they existed from the 1820s on, and actually in all, and there were several dozens of German countries at the time. In all of them, there existed a kind of synagogal order or Jews order. They call it Judenordnung, or Synagogenordnung, issued by the state and prescribed all possible details of the service and even of the musical forms of the service. For example, forbidding too much ornaments in the singings of the cantor. It is ridiculous that the German states occupied themselves, the bureaucrats occupied themselves in issuing rules and orders how Jews should make music at their synagogues during the service. But you find all these details, and actually it was really a strong pressure. So the emancipation was not promised like for itself, but on definite conditions, and Jews had to fulfill these conditions.
Yes, I read in one of your articles that the concept of every Jew praying in his own rhythm and with his own melodies was perceived by the German government as chaotical, and so. And there we have also this question of aesthetics, which you mentioned very much in your writings. And you are absolutely right. There was a kind of a aesthetic code, which was, I think, very much coming from the Greek ideal. It is always about an ideal. And you were talking about, music in a synagogue is not about an aesthetic ideal. It is about communicating with God. And this is the result, the aesthetic result is completely different. So me as a contemporary composer, when I came to Sfat, and everybody was praying, in his own tempo, it was a cluster composition. So it was aesthetically absolutely modern and much more interesting than Lewandowski.
Absolutely. By the way, Lewandowski, if I may just add it, then the colleagues may continue. There was, we know, probably everybody knows this discussion on the using of organ, and Lewandowski wrote on it that it would be very useful to implement organ in the service because of the discipline. Because the mighty sound of the organ would prevent everybody of doing what he wants.
Yeah, this is a very interesting observation.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, Yasha, when you told that, and with Edwin too, when he speak about Jewish music like water. I think it's a beautiful picture that Jewish music is like water. When you are in a country, you see river, you see water, and in the water you have trace of all the landscape. And Jewish music is like that. It means it's like a river, and in the river you have all the different landscape of all the environment. So what is very interesting in that idea is. And it joins the idea of what is traditional and not traditional. I think in every time where Jews are living, they are of course keeping their tradition, but they are borrowing tradition from the environment and from the landscape. It means, and it was always traditional. It was for them it was a way to continue the tradition when they pray and they use the music that they hear. I feel that for it was not it was a continuity. It was not something different. You understand? I think it's on this way you have this paradox of a traditional music, but music in their time, in their area.
But you have the combination, of course, because it's not static. Yeah, it's because, as you say, it is a movement. It's like a river, because wherever you look, the bakashot is also renewal of Sephardic traditional music, and I think even in any synagogue I have been, there are different layers of very, very old, a little bit more new, and very new even. But you want all of it. You don't make the cut with the tradition. And maybe that is also the reason why we stepped on the phenomenon that also Edwin was the first to observe, that in the Reform synagogue, the old Portuguese melodies were preserved. There was not even not also aesthetically a complete cut. It was the concept of continuity.
When I studied my PhD, a very vast corpus of prayers, what was very interesting, I found its links between the very old cantillation and piyutim and some modern prayers. When I found it some very ancient version of that prayers, there is a little changement, but at the end, the melodic lines, they do the same melodic lines with piyutim, and so it's the liturgy. You have some little changement, but it's a way for the faithful to take this new liturgy and to integrate them with the ancient prayers, you know. Of course, what is really different if it's modern, if it's a composition according operatic style, it's really different. But a lot of composition without accompaniment, they slowly they began to be more like the ancient traditions. It was a phenomenon very interesting.
Well, that's why I mentioned, I don't want to defend this concept of hybrid. I mean, the hybrid culture has been described by Homi Bhabha, who's actually an Indian scholar. And the idea is that you have a culture that is rooted like in the earth, and then the branches are, I mean, at the branches you can add as you can have a hybrid tree with one side has apples and the other side has pears. So that is actually the concept that you keep the roots. The roots are inchangeable, and well, for the Jewish culture, it is actually the Old Testament, the Tanakh, and the festivals, also the year, and the, of course, the mitzvot. But even those who didn't keep, I mean, the maskilim that didn't keep mitzvot, they felt this root, this cultural root. Even we heard it again that we had a presentation of students this morning about the Yiddish elite, and there were revolutionaries that even became communists. They had cut with the rabbi influences, but they were talking about Egypt being free from slavery. For them, the slavery was Russian Tsar. And so this is a collective consciousness about the value of individual freedom. And I think it's very strong in the Jewish communities.
Well, what can I add? There is so much to add, but basically, Reinhard, you are very much engaged with the concept of tradition, and you know, there are many definitions in the literature, in anthropology, in social sciences about this concept. But what most scholars agree that this is a modern concept. That is, when society was traditional, nobody really conceptualized, you know, that what we are doing is traditional. What we're doing is the way we learn how to perform our deeds in daily life, and not to think whether they are, you know, more valuable or less valuable. So the issue of value is something that we developed in the modern period. That doesn't mean that people did not have consciousness that some of their assets are of extreme ancient roots. So I think that Yasha already touched on two important issues. And one issue is that a lot of the explanations for the survival of the Jewish people does not have to do with the Jews, but have to do with the environment that did not allow the full integration of the Jews within the social fabric of the surrounding society. That doesn't mean that the Jews didn't have agency on themselves, of course, and that they have a consciousness that they carry a baggage of values, texts, ideals that are important. And the most important idea is the messianic idea, which we didn't mention. That is to say that you maintain because there is a future. There is a future. And from this point of view, even modern Zionism is part of the same story. It's just different implementation of an ancient idea. So this idea of redemption, that there is a future, is what keeps you alive and within your community who shares this value. And if you add to that more anthropological issues like endogamic, that is to say, you maintain being married all the time within the same group of people, so that you maintain a certain, I don't want to use 19th century racial terms, but certainly you keep a certain endogamic community. So if you fuse these three major elements, the external pressure and the internal drive to messianic times, plus the daily practice, okay, and I want to repeat again, the daily practice of liturgy is like a diet that a Jew has. Nobody can pray for you. No priest can stand and say the prayers for you. You have to say that for yourself. 3 times a day, 4 times in Shabbat, 5 times in Yom Kippur. And these prayers, these texts, are quite genial in a sense that they maintain the sense of the continuity from the past, from the time that Torah was given to Moses, but also the projection into the future. There is a hope, there is a future, and there is a promise of God that we will be redempted. And you say that 3 times a day, it gets into your blood, generation after generation. So this is why I think that we shouldn't project, I repeat again, like what we said even before regarding the Holocaust, we shouldn't all the time look at history backwards to apply our concepts into what was in the past. Having said that, yes, there are many features which are very interesting, aesthetical, regarding the performance of the prayer. As I said before, to perform the Jewish prayers, you even don't need to perform one pitch. You can do that just by saying it. Okay, so any pitch differentiation, rhythmical differentiation, it's an addition that is of course crucial, because you don't speak to God like you speak to your people at home or to your friends. So you enhance that prayer with a different pitch organization that becomes more and more sophisticated as we go along in time. And then very early, there was this consciousness of Jewish sound that is separated, that is unique within the environment in which the Jews lived. And on the other hand, the sound of the outside permeates into the Jewish community. So what we have all the time is very different degrees of conversations between these two musical, how should I say, musical, not repertoires, but musical capitals. It's a musical capital that you have, and you negotiate. And even within the Jewish community itself, it's interesting to see how people heard other Jews, what Jews made. One of the most nicest episodes that I can tell you is comes from Venice. Venice is a very important Jewish place that I love very much. Not only is a beautiful city, but it's a city where already by the end of the 15th century, early 16th century, Jews from different cultures found themselves in a very small place together. That is to say, German Jews escaping from the north, the local ancient Italian population, Spanish Jews flying away from Spain, and Byzantine Jews coming from the east to the west. And in one place, you find all the Jews together. So there is a very famous Ashkenazi scholar, Elia Bachur was his name, and an Yiddishist. Okay, he already spoke Judeo-German, and he wrote a tractate on Ta'amei Mikra, which is called Tuv Ta'am, from the early 16th century, 1516, I think. And there, at the introduction, he says, I came from Germany, and he called himself Ashkenazi. Okay, Yehuda Bachur Ashkenazi. He is proud of his heritage. Okay, he said, I hear these Sephardic and Italian Jews reading the Torah. They say they don't know how to read the Torah because they don't sing all the Te'amim. They only sing the mapsikim, the stops. And all the rest is, So already there you see this tension, intra-Jewish tension between me and you, between us and others. And this is why I had the subtitle in my presentation of the attraction of otherness. Okay, so there is a consciousness of otherness, but there is also sometimes an attraction of otherness because you can perhaps transpose your ideas of authenticity into the other. The other is more authentic than me. Okay, I stop being authentic. Let's hear a more authentic Jews, which is what happened basically with the impact of Edelson's work, that when it was published and diffused, very assimilated European Jews say, oh my gosh, these Yemenite Jews, these are the original Jews. These are the ones who kept every tradition. And no matter how much we will still repeat that the music of the Yemenite Jews sounds exactly like the music of the Yemenite Muslims, it doesn't matter. It's already such a strong myth that you cannot destroy. So the issues are complicated simply because in our period we have access to so much information and so much different worldviews of what is a Jew, what is to be Jew. As you know, the Israeli state cannot define still until today who is really a Jew. Okay. So they use Hitler's definition, which is such a paradox that we cannot come to terms as to who is really part of the Jewish community. So when you talk about music, it's exactly the same. This is why it's difficult to speak about Jewish music, as I already wrote and said so many times. So for me, Jewish music is what everybody's talking about Jewish music. That's it. So some people speak, about contemporary art music. Some people speak about ancient cantillations, and some people speak about klezmer. There are people for whom Jewish music is only klezmer music. That's it. Yiddish music, klezmer music. Nekuda. Okay. When I play the first class of Jewish music at Hebrew University, I play Lewandowski. I always open with Matovu, like the morning prayer of Lewandowski. Of course, the Israeli students say that's Christian music. How do you start the course in Jewish music with Christian music? Okay, so all these perceptions are very contingent to context, and this is what is important to say. And the final anecdote. Regarding the aesthetics of the German synagogue, even before the 19th century. In the 18th century, Cantor Aaron Baer from Berlin, one of the first cantors from whom we have the manuscript of his tunes, he wrote 52 Lechadodis. And he writes, I wrote one Lechadodi for every Shabbat so that the congregation cannot sing with me. Every Shabbos a different melody, so he can only sing along. So there you, yeah, Shirul Adonai Shir Chadash, yeah. So that's tells us again about the different aesthetic strategies, and of course we are speaking about Berlin in 1770, 1780, 1790. He also composed all the Lechadodis according to melodies, which, in my opinion, they stole everything from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. That was the aesthetic idea of this cantor. So that's my input into your question, Rainer.
But I think I absolutely agree with you. But don't you think that it is also part of the Jewish culture not to have in the rabbinic tradition a kind of music theory? Because the Greeks, they had music theory, and the question, what is a Dorian scale, and how you should observe the rules in Europe was actually much more theoretically present, and the huge flexibility of the and diversity of Jewish musical heritage from India to German, Javan, Greek, Italy, Germany, East Europe. I mean, it's you have inside the Jewish musical traditions almost all traditions of the world. But isn't the reason for that this is possible? The fact that I learned also from our teacher Israel Adler, that actually, beside the question of playing an instrument on Shabbat, which was not actually a musical question, was a question of the Chorban HaBeit HaMikdash, the destruction of the temple. So Al Tismach Yisrael, you should not, after the destruction of the temple, you should not use instruments and to defend the tuning of the instruments during Shabbat. But beside that, which is more theological question, there is no restriction which kind of melody is a good Jewish melody or a Jewish melody at all. Now, if I compared, the psalmody, the Tamei Emet, I came to the same result as Edelsong, that everybody has his own tradition, and you cannot even find eine Urtradition, a common root where all the others are dependent or have been. And I think that is very deep in the Jewish musical culture, that you're free to actually also to adapt what you want to adapt. Isn't that right? You don't get a crash with tradition. You get a crash if you don't pray, if you don't hold Shabbat, if you don't read the Torah. But you don't have a crash with the environment if you use melodies from the others, as yourself, and if you're attracted by the culture of your environment, the musical culture.
What is very interesting in what you said, Reinhard, is when I recorded a lot of Faithful, at the beginning, when I asked them to sing a synagogue tune, to sing something of their tradition, they began to sing some tunes, some lechadodias. But when I say, what about the cantillation, or about some piotim, about cantillation? Oh no, it's not music. It's just cantillation. It's not music, absolutely not. And they don't consider this the cantillation as music. And I think it's very interesting because, as you know, and I think there was no word in the Bible to design just the music. The Hebrew term musica, it was created after, during the period of in Spain, due to the influence of the Arabic theory, the Greek theory about music. But in Bible, you have Tehillim, you have psalmody, you have a lot of shir, but not musica, just musica. You have not this word. So I think what is the most important is the text in Jewish religion, not the music. The music was just a way to support the text, to say the text, and it was not. I think it was not a real concept in itself. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in that way, I think it's for that reason that you can borrow every tune. You can borrow the tune you want. You can borrow the music of the environment. You can change the music, but you can't change the text. Any word of the Bible, any word of the prayer, you can change it.
Yeah, you can even borrow Mozart's tunes, even if they are secular. Yeah, if they have a secular origin.
Mm.
Regarding the tradition, there's a joke about a congregation, a Jewish congregation, of course, where every time during the service there was an argument, because during a definite prayer, some of people would stand up and the others would stay sitting, and the whole time they were struggling. Every time when this prayer would appear, these two parties would struggling against each other. And finally, the board meeting, there was an idea to visit an old cantor who would be already almost 100 years old, to ask him what is the real tradition, the real minhag of the congregation. And they went to him, to the old people's home, and representatives of both parties. And first party asked, yeah, please confirm us that during this prayer we have to stand up. Is it the minhag? And the cantor answers, no, it is not the minhag, not the tradition. The other part, okay, then we should stay sitting. This is the minhag. No, it is not the minhag. Yeah, but please help us. It is a case. It disturbs the whole service, and every time there's an argument about it. And the cantor says, oh, this is the minhag, the argument.
Very nice. This is a very nice one.
Yeah, but I wanted to add something regarding the perspective, the aesthetical perspective of the tradition, because of course when we today listen to the music of Sulzer or Lewandowski, we have associations with Christian music, with church music. But I think for at the time when this music was created, they had quite different aesthetical perspective on this, because when you read the theoretical writings, and for example in this first cantorial journal, the liturgical journal, there are a lot of texts reflecting the perspective of that time, and namely that they didn't regard this new music as a break with the tradition. On the contrary, it was about restoring the tradition of the old temple, which was corrupted during the time of diaspora. And it is not as absurd as we may now see, because in aesthetical terms, there is much more parallels between the music of the Reform synagogue and the music of the Jerusalem temple than compared to the music of the Orthodox synagogue and music of the temple. I think it is really this well-organized musical event is much closer to the temple time than to the tradition of the Orthodox synagogue. So they actually they were at some point they were right.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And moreover, Yasha, there is a strong line of tradition regarding this idea that goes back to Leone da Modena. If you read his introduction to Rossi, it's all about restitution of Templar music. And so this idea that Templar music equals the best music that we know today, that is to say in Sulzer's time, it was not new at the time, was already in the literature, and one only has to to read Sulzer's introduction. People usually don't read what he has to say. And certainly he's speaking there about our nationalische tradition. That is he's speaking about nation already in proto-modern type of sense of the Jewish nation, and that he's restituting the music, first of all, by cleaning it up from deviations that were added through different periods and leaving the line as it used to be. So from that point of view, absolutely there is a certain continuity. And Reinhard, I want to tell you something that may disappoint you. The idea that the restrictions against instrumental music has to do with this theological issue of the disruption of the temple services. It's very appealing, and certainly there is some truth to that. But if you look in the Talmud, inside, it seems that the main issue was that they say if you use an instrument may be broken on Shabbat. If you're playing the violin, the string may break, and then you will be forced to fix it and then to transgress Shabbat. And that seems to be a much more daily concern of the rabbis, that if you use instruments and they go wrong in Shabbat, you will have to fix them. Again, I am not trying to demystify everything about what we think about Jewish music in the past, but we have to put that in that context too. And there is many discussions about can you then have a non-Jew, a Gentile, playing music on Shabbat. And there are even some Ashkenazi rabbis that say if there is a wedding on Shabbat, you can employ non-Jewish musicians playing instrumental music. So there are so many different positions regarding that issue of which also has to do with aesthetics, because after all, using a musical instrument it's an aesthetical position.
I'm lucky that I play piano. It is very improbable that it would get broken, and especially on Shabbat.
Yeah, but it seems, Yasha, that 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, the instruments were more fragile than a Steinway.
Definitely.
And still, in all pianos, I have already seen a string that jumps.
Yes.
But I am a violinist, so in violin, certainly a string can break very easily.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. What is very interesting in France, I spoke yesterday about the introduction of the organ, and I forgot to precise that most of the organ players, they were non-Jews at the beginning of the 19th. And sometimes you have two organists. One was Jews, but he was not authorized to play during Shabbat and the festival. He was just playing for wedding or for official ceremony. And the non-Jew was playing for Shabbat and for the other festival. So, I found it exactly what you say, Edwin. Some rabbis argues that if there is a problem with the instrument, and even with the non-Jews, it's impossible to repair the organ during Shabbat. So it's better to forbid it.
Reinhard, I would like to hear from the students. I mean, this seems to be a conversation only between us, and we have students. I would like to hear their questions, their opinions. I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. I just want to recall that we had 10 different presentations now from Monday to today, starting, 4 about klezmer, of course, but also about like composers like Lenny Bernstein and the history of the family. Very interesting. Or Ernest Bloch. Bloch is still very underrepresented in concert life here in Germany. And we had presentations about Yiddish song in Eastern Europe, the Beregovsky collection. We listened to the original tunes that he recorded, very exciting and very touching documents with transcriptions, and also this kind of special way of multimetric song forms, you know. And we had an introduction to the assimilated Jews like Mendelssohn, Fanny Mendelssohn. Tomorrow we'll have another about Mendelssohn, and about Wagner's anti-Semitism, which is a very sad, but it's also very interesting subject, because I learned that Wagner, he was afraid of the capacity to assimilate themselves. The assimilation of the Jews frightened him. I don't know why, but this is, I think, a very interesting aspect. What we can see as quality, that Jews between for 1,700 years were in different countries in the world able to maintain their culture and by also assimilating themselves to the environment was seen as dangerous. Yes. Let's see if my students are a little bit shy. So we will have to give them a little time, I think. So, but let's try. Okay. Let's see if somebody.
Of course, they can ask in German too, if language is the problem.
По-русски тоже можно.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm sorry, but I maybe a little later, so they have the time to think it over, and maybe we frighten them. Yeah. So Edwin, what would you prefer? What you propose? What should we? How should we proceed? Yeah.
Can I ask something? Just I was very interested by what was said about what Yasha said about men and women choirs, and you know, I think it was different between France and Germany, the evolution of the worship. In France, the choir were just composed by men and boys, choir boys. And during all the 19th century, no woman was singing in the choir. No woman. It was, I think the French Judaism was more orthodox than the German Judaism. Because even in the most Reform synagogue, you don't have women. Women began to sing at the beginning of the 20th century, and the French consistory admit the voice of the woman because of practical reason. Because after the First World War I, there was no more men in the choir. Men were killed, and so in most of the synagogues, they have to use the women to sing the prayer. So, for example, in Bayern, you have the choir after the World War I was composed just by women, and in Paris. It was a question of man and a question of financial cost, because a woman can sing very louder than boys. So you need just one woman for 3 or 4 boys. So it was for practical reasons that as Jules Franck, he was the director of the music of the temple, he decided to employ women for singing, and it was the beginning of the mixed choir, but it begins very late. It began yes, it was on 1920, about 1920 that mixed choir began, and after, as I told you yesterday, at the beginning of the 70s, it stopped because of renewal of the Orthodox movement in France due to the arrival of the North African Jews. Because when the North African Jews arrive in France and they hear women singing and organ accompaniment, and they say, "What? We are in a church? It's not a synagogue here." And they were very active in the worship, so they decided to stop this reform movement. So it was absolutely different, I think. I don't know what you are thinking about that, because I know that you are you know very well the German worship, but I think the direction was different in the way to sing and to make the modern worship. In France, it was more, yes, okay, we are making choirs, but no woman, we respect no woman, no voice of women. And the organ, as I told you, is used, but I think not so used like in German. What do you think about that?
First of all, I think it is admirable, this pragmatic view and the pragmatic deeds. So if you don't have any men, so you just take women. Yeah, no, I think I cannot actually answer this question, because we see quite different situations in different congregations and in different type of reform. I know that in Germany too, in many congregations, it was a huge problem also in the inside of the reform movement, the voice of Kol Isha. The Kol Isha, it was still a problem even in the 20th century. And I guess the Hamburg congregation was just at the time very progressive compared to many other synagogues of the reform movement. And I don't think it is just usual for the 19th century in Germany to use a mixed choir. But I think it should be should answer somebody who is really very knowledgeable on in this matter. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, what is very interesting, I think most of the French liturgy worship was at the beginning of this renewal, at the beginning of the 19th, very influenced by the German liturgy, by the German worship. As you can see, the first Israel Lowy, who was from German, he was the first to renew the consistorial liturgy. After you have Samuel Naumburg, was from Germany. You have always German, and a lot of composers and musicians, they were coming from German. We don't speak about that, but of course I am thinking about Fromental Levi, even Offenbach. He was singing with his father at the Köln synagogue, and even other composers who wrote some songs for the French synagogues, they were from Germany. So I think you have a real influence from Germany, which was coming in France. And it goes in parallel. But after the war of 1970, the trends they go in other direction, because due to the conflicts, there were no more French and German Jews were separated, and they took some different direction, I think.
Reinhard, you wanted to tell something?
No, I wanted to propose. I didn't get your question.
I just wanted to mention something different, but
okay, yeah,
on this
yes.
collaboration between German states and France, between the origin of the Jewish reform. It was due to occupation of Westphalia by the French troops. So otherwise it probably would not be possible to establish the reform movement at the time in Germany at all. And so you see it's like vice versa. So the French Napoleon troops come to Germany and help to establish the Jewish reform, and then the Jewish reform cantors go to France to help promote the reform movement in France.
Yes, you're right, but the process of emancipation began legally with the Edict of Toleration of Joseph II of Austria. So, and it began in 1781. So it was before before the Edict of Toleration of Louis XVI. It was in 1787. And so it's, I don't know if it's really began with the Napoleon troops. I think it's began a little before. It was depending on what we say the philosophy of the Enlightenment and the Scala.
Sure, but we celebrate the reform movement starting with Israel Jacobson in Season, the first temple in Season near Kassel. So during the French occupation.
Yes, of course.
Hervé, you had a musical example prepared. Maybe this is a good moment to listen to some music. I imagine maybe you had something. We were talking in preparation to this discussion about, the successful boom of Jewish composers in the 19th century. And you mentioned already Frommental Halevi and Jacques Offenbach. Offenbach is a very interesting phenomenon because we saw it with Gershwin in the United States, that many Jewish musicians, they were sons of cantor. Offenbach has been a son of a cantor in Cologne. Were very talented for popular music, writing popular music. I don't know if there is a connection, but maybe you have an answer for it.
Yeah, the Institute of European Jewish Music recorded a CD 2 years ago about Jacques Offenbach and Close, and it was just for us. It was very interesting to study the links between the Jewish composer and who wrote for the synagogue and the opera. It was Jacques Offenbach and his Close from the synagogue to the opera. Mm-hmm. It was quite interesting to see how it was linked. In fact, you have some composers like Offenbach, like Frommental Halevi, like even Meyerbeer. He gives some one of his compositions to be adapted to the French synagogue, and it's a number which adapted these pieces for for free voices, and even some like Emil Jonas, as I spoke yesterday, he was very famous at this time. He worked with Jacques Offenbach for the opera, and a lot of different opera composers. We have to remember that Fromental Alevi was in 1851, the French consistoire created a commission for singing the prayers, how to sing the prayer, how to put the liturgy in order, and Fromental Alevi was at the head of this commission. So it was very interesting. He accepted to participate. He was not a very religious man, but he was conscious of his Jewish identity, and he composed some prayers for the synagogue. And it was not for the first time. What I wanted to make to hear you is a work that he composed as he was very young. It was in 1820 for the ceremony for the death of the what is the name? It was just yes. He wrote a piece of circumstances, Mima Makim. It's a psalm, 130, and it was a command, official command from the Kingdom of France to commemorate the death of the Duke of Berry, who was a nephew of the king and was assassinated during the night of 13 to 14 February 1820. And the consistoire asked to Fromental Alevi to write this piece for this ceremony. And it was the first time that a piece was given in the new temple. It was very important because they asked a free official religion to make the same ceremony. So Rossini wrote something for the, I think, the Christian worship, and I don't know who wrote for the Protestant worship, but for the Jewish worship it was Fromental Alevi, and it was written for a free voice male choir, accompanied by an orchestra, very great orchestra, very imposing, timpani, double bass, cellos, viola, violin, a great orchestra, and some clarinets, oboes, flute, and it was performed in the Parisian temple of the Rue Sainte-Avoye. And it was published after, and it was such a first consistorial composition published in France. And if you have a few minutes, I want to make hear you this pieces. So I will take where is it? Yes, I think it's here. So yes, you have. I will take the choir because if not, it will be too longer. I hope it will work.
You choose computer tune.
Just a minute. Where is the computer tune?
Because the quality becomes much better than.
What? But it doesn't work for now. Just a minute. Do you hear something? So I will put that. Okay. So
Very beautiful.
yes, and
I have never heard about that.
the original, as I told you, is written for orchestra, but we don't have the means, so financial means to play with an orchestra. But it was the first time that it was recorded, and if you are thinking that he wrote this score, he was only 20 or 21 years old. Frumental Levit, I think it's really impressive. So, yeah. And this score was at the National Library of French National Library, but was never given, never recorded. So if you find money to make the orchestration, we have the score.
Great. Yeah. So how do you explain that this has not been recorded before by somebody else? Has the score been reconstituted now and has been lost before? Or?
No, you have a very few exemplary of the score, and the only exemplary was funded by Gérard Gonvert. It is a colleague of mine, a musicologist. He was making his research 30 years ago, and he found this score at the, as I told you, at the French library, National Library. But nobody knows about that score. So he was advising me, and after we began the works, and so when I decided to make this record on Offenbach and clauses, I thought about Frumental Levit, and it was the occasion to give this piece. So it was a way to record it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to come a little bit back to your question, Reinhard, before you mentioned Jacques Offenbach and the special contribution of the Jews to the popular music. I think it is a very interesting question because it is really a phenomenon, the role of Jewish musicians and the success of Jewish musicians on this field, at least until the mid of the 20th century, because the second half of the 20th century is not that special anymore. And in my eyes, Offenbach was really the founder of popular musical culture in modern terms, and for me, like a paradigmatic figure in this respect. Because I think it is by no means incidentally that the Jews participated that much. You can see the time of the Weimar Republic or early Broadway period, up to 90% maybe Jews in all possible area of popular music were Jewish, and I think it is because of the nature of this culture. It is the highest innovation of all possible music areas at the time in the field of the musical culture. It's everything about crossing borders, all possible borders, stylistical borders, social borders, economical borders, and I think it is. We talked before about the tradition and the Jewish relationship to traditions. Actually, all these popular music genres, they were all against any tradition. Yeah, so it was breaking tradition and crossing the border, and the Jews showed themselves as very capable in this quality of crossing borders and breaking traditions.
Yes, like Freud and Schoenberg.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this refers us back to Edwin's thesis, which I'm 100% agree with, that I don't know if it is now a common scientific proven fact, but the German sociologist Eugen Rosenstock-Huessy, he stated in his sociology from the 20s that Jews invented the future. That he says the category of future was not existent before Edwin says messianic, but before the future is already the promised land. It starts already with Abraham. You leave your land, and then you will go somewhere where you will meet a future, a wonderful future. You will be all over the earth. You know, it's one family, but it's a real utopian projection into the nowhere. Actually, if you compare with the Egyptian way of looking at things, it is more cyclic. I mean, it's cosmic, and that is the repetition of it's the eternal now, which is oh, somebody is working. Yeah, it's not Shabbat, so it's okay. And what he claimed is that the tribal thinking is fixed on the past. Tribes always preserve tradition and looking back into the past. Well, this is a theory. I don't know if you heard about it, but I think it was very convincing that the mental capacity to create future in your mind is a very Jewish contribution of Jewish culture to the world.
Rainer, you're expecting us to say something, or?
Yes, please.
Oh, well, I don't want to address such a metaphysical issue now, but regarding your previous question to Hervé, why the piece by Alevi was recorded only so recently and also not in its final or full form, I can tell you that 99% of Jewish music in scores is not recorded.
Ah, okay.
So basically what we hear from the Jewish past that is recorded in scores is a very minimal section of it. There is so much to do in terms of reviving and recordings. I mean, you know, if we didn't have Yasha, we didn't have tens of pieces that were totally forgotten, and now we can listen to them. So it's in the process, but there is still so much. And I'm talking also, even if we are selective, music that is worthwhile recording, because not everything is worthwhile recording. There is still so much to be done.
But the Israeli radio could take up a piece like that and record it.
You're kidding me.
There's a choir, there's an orchestra. No interest.
No, I don't think so. Only when we can bring some budgets from our projects, like we did 2 years ago with the chamber choir of the Music Academy in Jerusalem. We did a beautiful program on Jewish music in Odessa. Recorded for the first time a couple of pieces by Pinchas Minkowski, great Jewish Russian cantor, composer, musicologist. Even the music of a person that is recognized as so important was never recorded in the past. So So whenever we have the opportunity to put some of these cores into practice, we do that, but it's very limited. And it costs a lot, as Hervé already said, to hire an orchestra. And I mean, some things were done, like, the Milken Archive of American Jewish Music is a project because Mr. Milken has the means. So a lot of music was recorded, American Jewish music, which part of it is called American, but it's really European by origin. So we have now very good, of high quality recordings of music from different composers and periods and genres in the Milken archive, but still, it's only 50 CDs. You can do 50 more easily, so there is also a selective process there.
Okay.
Which in itself has its own ideology, but what is selected and also how you perform that in what type of arrangement. So, but still, we still lack a lot of the Jewish musical past is still absent.
There's already some sounds. Did you hear that of kitchen sounds in the back? I hear that here. I don't know where it comes from. So I think people are preparing already supper somewhere. Well, I'll take another effort to ask my students if they have maybe a last nice question to Edwin or Yasha or Hervé. So we have a long break, silence, and see if somebody dares to ask a question. We will be happy.
Rainer, I'd suggest that we adjourn, even if 5 minutes earlier than planned. I think that that the subject. I mean, we could talk among ourselves for few more hours, but
yes, of course. Yeah.
But first of all, I don't know if I can talk on the name of my colleagues and friends to express our gratitude to you for putting us together, for organizing. Of course, we still have tomorrow, which we look forward, and just a marvelous idea. And I hope we can follow up and ask the Hochschule to put this orchestra and choir and put a nice concert of Jewish music in Hamburg, as Yasha already hinted, to have the budget and certainly you have all the skills and all the professionals there to do wonderful performances of music by Kurnitzer, by Henle, by all the composers that we mentioned here. It will be even nice to record a couple of Jewish chorales, a couple of Jewish Lutheran chorales, just to have that sound also on record, so that we can play to our students some of this music. I think that can be a very nice follow-up from this initiative.
But you know that Yasha is teaching at the Weimar Hochschule für Musik, University of Music, which is of a very, very high quality. The students that come to us from Weimar are really excellent. But Yasha, do you think that you were at the source?
The quality.
Are you trying, or is it difficult?
The musical quality is not a problem. The problem is always money.
Money, okay.
It is going to be even a bigger problem because German government is going to spend 100 billions of euro 100 billions of euro for the defense attire in the next future. So I'm not sure that it would be still enough for Kornitzer and Handel. So you know, defense attire is much more important than music.
Yeah, yeah. That's very sad.
Absolutely, it
Very
is
sad. Very sad.
devastating.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Yasha.
So,
I'm not sure.
I think
that
we
got-
can say goodbye.
I won't be there tomorrow.
Yes.
I want to apologize. I won't be there tomorrow because I have a lot of appointments. So excuse me, Yuval, excuse me. I won't be for your lecture, but I'm sure it will be wonderful, and I will look it at YouTube after. Okay, and Reinhard too. So thank you for.
No problem.
Hervé, give my best regards to Jorge Rosenblum.
Okay.
He surprised me,
Uh,
sent me an email
Yeah.
years ago saying he corresponded regarding one of the CDs in which he participated, and he wrote me. I think it was the beginning of emails, the era of emails. He wrote, "Yes, I would very much like to send you our CD," and then added, "If you are Yuval Shaked, who studied at the Rubin Music Academy in Tel Aviv in the 70s, then I am Giora Rosen, who studied in your class. So Jorge Rosenblum alias Giora Rosen, best regards."
Yes. I have an appointment with him tomorrow on 12 because we have some project with Span. On that way that I'm not free tomorrow. So, okay, I will do it with pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you all for participating for this wonderful discussion. I learned a lot, and well, I see you not all of you, but some of you will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Where we will finish with Josef Thal, 2 lectures, one about his opera Ashmedai and the opera The Tower. It will be our Yuval and mine joint effort to bring this music to our conscious, which is almost forgotten also already. I mean, Ashmedai has never been performed since 1970.
Bye-bye.
So,
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
until tomorrow.